All right, it's Monday. That means another edition of our Ask Mike segment with Mike Irwin. I'm Nick Petriccioni. 4-0 for the Razorbacks as we head into now Georgia week. So let's jump right into this thing. Our first question is from Alex Hogs 488. He says, give us your top 5 moments, Mike, from the A&M game.
You know, it wouldn't be the kind of stuff you see on the highlight reel, because that would include those 2 touchdowns and a lot of other stuff. To me, the top 5 plays happened in a sequence in the fourth quarter when the game really got dicey. It's down to a 7-point game. Arkansas is not moving the football. They desperately need something to happen. And I'm thinking to myself, with Malik Hornsby in as a quarterback, and he hasn't thrown the ball, and they're loading up to stop the run, and I'm thinking to myself, they've got to score some points. They at least have to get a field goal. Take this 1-possession lead and up it just a little bit, and let the defense do the rest. And I remember telling you, they need a turnover. They need a turnover. And boom, just
2 plays later,
there it was. Buster Brown comes down, Tarek Brown comes down with that pick. He had to really reach out to get it, and they reviewed it like 400 times, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, they're going to overturn this, but they didn't. So you have the pick. So now you've got the ball on their end of the field, but it's just inside their end of the field. You still got to drive 20, 25, 30 yards to get in field goal range, to be sure. And how are they going to do that? Well, Dominic Johnson, been complaining the whole game because they're not playing him. He was my pick for the player of the game on the game day show.
Never showed up until.
And I'm thinking to myself, he's your best guy for A&M's defense. Why is he not playing? And Sam Pittman addressed that in the press conference. They said, we got to get him some more touches. He says that every week. I don't know what's going on there. But Dominic comes in finally, and he goes 13 yards on the first play after the pick. Now, that's big, because that gets them a first down, which they hadn't been able to do. And I think it loosened up Malik a little bit, because right after that, he rolled out and threw his first pass and completed it to Treylin Burks. And it wasn't a big pass play, maybe 8 yards, but then Dominic got another first down. And then you had, I think it was Burks came back and ran like 14 or 15 yards. And so those four plays put them in a position to where that field goal kick was going to be automatic. And then, of course, the kick itself is a highlight. I think that sequence of 5 plays during that, they're not all dramatic to look at, but if you don't do that, if you don't move the ball right there at that time and get some points out of that, I think they lose the game.
I thought one of yours was also going to be when Malik trucked that guy right on the 2-yard line.
No, I think those 4 plays, they're not exciting to look at necessarily, but every one of them were necessary, or the 5 plays, the field goals you got to add in too.
And they get that 20-10 win. All right, next question comes for us from @Mousetown, who wants to know, what was your reaction to Arkansas going for it on 4th and 1 at the Aggie 22-yard line late in the first half? I know you have some opinions on this.
Do you remember my reaction?
Yeah, it wasn't good.
I was like, what are they doing? I mean, you have to go back to that point in the game. A&M had done nothing in the first half. They had no momentum. They were totally demoralized. They couldn't move the ball. Arkansas had moved the ball, maybe not every time they had it, but they were
going down the field.
They were moving the ball. They had tremendous offensive numbers in the first half, but didn't have the points to reflect that. But that's sort of like what A&M's been this year. They've been a team that's given up yards, but they don't give up a lot of points. But I felt like you kick a field goal there, you go to the locker room up 20-0. You've got momentum coming back out. Instead, you let them get that stop. You lose momentum. For the first time in the half, they go on a controlled drive and go down and kick a field goal. So now it's getting a little too close for comfort. Then they come back out. They've got momentum in the third quarter, and then immediately Jefferson gets hurt. And now everything turns around. And to me, it all started with that decision. But be that as it may, they did what we just talked about. They had that one sequence which helped. And then you got to give Arkansas's defense a lot of credit. There aren't too many people that could lose their starting quarterback in a situation like that and pretty much rely on their defense for the entire half, which is what they did with just that help of that one field goal. So it didn't end up killing them, but it could have.
Now, what do you think when Sam Pittman said after the game he would have went for it again? Regardless of the situation, he said if he could have went back in time, he would have went for it again.
If you go for it, then I'm fine with that. But don't go for it with Treylin Smith, who weighs 190 pounds, as opposed to K.J. Jefferson, who weighs 240.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That part didn't make any sense either. And you could see K.J. come off the field, and he was complaining, like, give it to me, you know?
All right, Blood Red Hog asks, how is TV scheduling decided for SEC games? CBS gets first pick, but then what? How is this top 10 Georgia matchup at noon Eastern time?
The first thing I would say is those games are picked at least a week in advance, sometimes longer than that. So it's not the no-brainer. You know, if it was this week, it would really be stupid. But they make those picks earlier. Now, I don't think CBS was ever going to pick Arkansas 2 weeks in a row. Now, they are under consideration. It was announced on Monday. The Ole Miss-Arkansas game is under consideration for the 2:30 CBS game next week. And I think that depends on what happens in this Georgia game.
100%.
You know, I don't think Arkansas has to win it, but if they play well, then I think that's a good matchup. But why it ended up like this, well, CBS passed on it. Then it goes to ESPN. And here's the mistake. ESPN has all kinds of time slots available to it. And they had 2 primetime spots, an afternoon. And why they decided on that, I can only assume that somebody at ESPN that was involved in this just said Arkansas is not going to beat A&M. So therefore, the Georgia thing is not going to be that big of a deal. And they ended up blowing a chance to put in prime time a top 10 matchup. And that's just on ESPN. ESPN is not an organization, I've said it on this show before, that I respect. I respected them in the 80s and 90s. But about 2000 going forward, they got real political. Their reporters started getting political, mixing politics with sports. They made a lot of bad decisions. They lost some good people. They fired some good people. And to me, they've got a lot of people working up there now that just kind of ding, 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 ding. I don't know what's going on with them. But it's on them. It's on ESPN. That's how it happened.
Yeah, that game against Ole Miss under consideration for ESPN at like 11 and then CBS at 2:30. I think are those 2 times that were announced on Monday. All right. Arkansas Playbore wants to know, was that not a late hit on K.J. Jefferson on the play he got hurt? How serious is his injury? Should he now be in the Heisman conversation? Wow, that's a big question.
Technically, it was not a late hit. He was on his way out of bounds. His momentum would have carried him out of bounds, but his feet were still in bounds when he got shoved hard from behind. And there's no question that shove was intended to push him over against all that equipment that was over there. I think the guy pushing him knew exactly what he was doing, because if you're just trying to make sure he doesn't turn upfield, all you got to do is you're right behind him anyway, and if he makes any move to turn upfield, then that's when you shove him. But his momentum was carrying him out. He was trying to run out of bounds, and you just caught him with your foot right before he crosses the line, and you give him a hard shove, and that's what pushed him into that equipment. So is it a dirty play? Yeah, I think it is. But should a foul be called? No, because he's technically still in bounds. And he didn't do anything like targeting or anything like that. So it ends up just being football. Now, how serious is that injury? Sam Pittman addressed that on Monday. He said he's very sore, which it's his knee, he has a bruised knee. He said he'll be fine for the game. Didn't say much about practice. So I'm going to make an assumption here that wasn't said. I think he's probably going to be limited in practice this week just to make sure he doesn't get that knee hit again and cause the problem all over again, to give it time to heal. And I think that will also give Malik Hornsby more time to be involved in reps in practice. And Sam Pittman said today, he said, we tried to run a package when he came in against A&M, and we've got to run our offense. And he basically said that he thought Kendall Briles was thinking that Sam Pittman, didn't want Malik to throw it there because you could get a turnover or whatever. Let's just use our defense to hold the lead. And he said, I wasn't thinking that at all. We needed to throw the ball. So my guess is they're going to work Hornsby a lot in practice this week just in case he has to come in. And then they're going to try to run the same type of offense that they do when KJ's there, which means he's going to have to throw the ball. And we'll see. Hopefully they won't have to find out. But if they do, I think the implication from Sam Pittman is Hornsby will be better prepared to play in this game than he was A&M, and he'd have to be because A&M Georgia's defense is much better than A&M.
So what do you make of that last question from Arkansas Playboy? Should he be in the Heisman conversation? I mean,
no.
that's hard.
That's too much. This is his first year as a starter. Technically, he's a redshirt sophomore. You don't win the Heisman like that unless you're just unbelievable. I would say next year, and if he were to somehow come back for his senior year, I mean, it's hard to project how much better he'll get. But if you want to start talking something like that, I think you're talking at least next year and maybe his senior year if he comes back his senior year.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. All right, Fuzzy Hog wants to know, what do you think Arkansas is going to name their trophy with Texas and Oklahoma like we have with LSU? The Boot and Missouri battle line. Maybe do a poll, maybe? Oh, that's something we could maybe put on the website.
I want Fuzzy Hog. We like everybody sending in their questions, so I don't want to throw cold water on him and make him not ask me any more questions. But I'm not probably the right guy to ask about this because I'm not a fan of these rivalry trophies. Maybe if you have one, like, you know, the old Oaken bucket or all these things that they've traditionally had at some of these schools, maybe one trophy per school. But Arkansas already had that boot with LSU. The problem came when they tried to jazz up this Missouri series and came up with this battle line rivalry. I'd like to take that trophy and just dump it in a trash can. First of all, how can Missouri be your rival when they're not even in the same division with you? It's a crossover game. It's a game you want to win, but it's not. There's no way that you're going to have the intensity with Missouri when they come here that you had with Texas. So forget that. Now, should they add some sort of trophy with, first of all, when you say Oklahoma or Texas, I don't think Arkansas will end up, if they do the pod system, I think Texas is going to end up in a pod with A&M and LSU and maybe Mississippi State. I think they'll kind of do it geographically, and that would put Arkansas in a pod with Missouri, Oklahoma, and maybe Ole Miss, because, you know, you're ending up in a pod with schools that are closest to you. So I think you can forget some sort of trophy with Texas because I don't think you'll play them every year. Now, maybe OU, we come up with a trophy for that. Here's the thing about it. How many trophies do you need?
Every game there's a trophy?
Are you going to just dream up a trophy for every game you play? And then, look, we got this trophy.
Yeah, it's like a participation ribbon when you run a race.
You now have that Southwest Classic trophy, which they brought back.
Yeah.
So now you got 3. I mean, give me a break. Now, maybe, I don't know what's going to happen to that Southwest Classic trophy when when the Jerry World game goes away and they start playing home and home with A&M. Do they continue to call it the Southwest Classic, even though it's not in Arlington anymore? And does this trophy just continue to get passed back and forth? I don't know, but don't ask me. But here's what I would recommend, because since he asked the question, if they do end up deciding to have a trophy with Texas and Oklahoma for the rivalry, I think we should let him decide.
Fuzzy Hog?
he should design it, come up with a name, because he couldn't do any worse than the dopey battle line thing they came up with, which is some weird Civil War reference, which that's almost an Aggie-like tradition. It's like, what? Yeah, like 150 years ago, yeah, there were some Yankees up there across the border, and we were the South here, and man, we had a battle of Prairie Grove and Pea Ridge and something. So it's a battle line rivalry. Come on, nobody gets into that. I don't think anybody from Arkansas is sitting there thinking, during the Civil War, those jerks up in Missouri were Yankees, and we don't like them. It's just not there.
Fuzzy Hog, you got homework on your next question. We also need a submission of a drawing for your trophy.
Come up with a drawing for the trophy.
Just attach a JPEG.
And a name. You got to name it.
We'll see you next week, Fuzzy Hog. All right, Twinkie275 asks, will any of PTN be there in Athens? Is there an area where we can cheer for the Hogs when they get off the bus, walk into the stadium, possibly a game day link?
Yeah, well, game day is going to be there. So if you want to be a part of that, if you're a Hog fan in Georgia, but you want to get lost in a sea of Georgia fan, you can go there, and it won't be hard to find.
They might shove you right to the front if you're one lone Razorback.
You just look and see where all those fans are, and that's where that set's going to be. I talked to Alyssa, and she said that if you will find the find our set, because she's going to be there with 2 or 3 others of our crew. She said, come up to the set. We'll put you on. We'll talk to you. So find Alyssa Orange, Rattler, and just say, hey.
Tara, I think, is going to be there too.
Yeah, say, hey, I live here in Georgia. I'm a Hog fan. Put me on. And they'll probably
we'd
put
love
you
to.
on.
Yeah, we'd love to have those people on. Yeah,
because there won't be too many Hog fans there, I'm pretty sure.
No, I don't think so either. So, yeah, if you're in Georgia, reach out to us. Maybe you'll get on right here on our Pig Trail Nation. All right. East Ark Hog wants to know, in light of the recent success of the Razorback Athletic Department, how would you compare our fan base to others as far as knowledge, loyalty, etc.? The SEC crew from ESPN seems to really enjoy themselves on Texas weekend. Where do you think we stand in the college landscape? That's actually a really good question.
It is a good question, and I would go all the way back to when I was a kid growing up outside of Lubbock going to Texas Tech games, and I can tell you, not just me, but I knew a lot of people that would talk back in those days when all those Southwest Conference teams would come in, and every other year you'd get a certain team come in, then you go play them the next year. But the word all around Lubbock among Texas Tech fans was that Arkansas had the best fan base outside of Lubbock. Of course, they liked their own fans, but they liked the Razorbacks. The fans would come in. They were so knowledgeable about what was going on. They knew all the players, the key players on both teams. And I can confirm that because I used to I'd take my lawnmower mowing money and buy a $6 ticket, which is the cheapest you could buy, and sit right next to the visitor section so I could hear what they were saying over there. And they always knew guys from both teams, even the Texas Tech guys that were key guys, and they just were smart. They knew football. You could tell by listening to them. And they weren't jerks like Aggies. My dislike for A&M in Texas come from those days, sitting there listening to their fans make fun of West Texas, or what's called the South Plains area in Lubbock, and make fun of it and talk about how ugly it was and how terrible it was that somebody would have to live out there. Razorback fans didn't do that. So going all the way back that far, I was impressed with the fan base. Now, many years later, when I was trying to find a college team to cover, because I had not, first 4 jobs, I was either covering high school, or the third job I had, I was in East Texas, but I could drive up on weekends to Dallas and cover the Cowboys and the Texas Rangers in the summer. And I thought covering pro sports would be fun, and I quickly decided it wasn't. I just didn't like the attitude of the coaches and the players. There was something about pro sports that was just too much all business. It wasn't fun. So I really wanted to cover a Southwest Conference team because I'd grown up around that league, and there was an opening for a job in Fayetteville, and I talked to some of my friends my best friend was a Razorback fan from the time he was a little kid, and then a guy I knew in college they said, take that job. And when I got here, that's the first thing I noticed was the one state thing where you got the whole state behind you. The fans were great, and the only problem with all of that is that, especially since joining the SEC, Arkansas has kind of been an afterthought. The program wasn't what it was in the old days in the SEC. You had some success. Houston Nutt had some success.
The non-rep
Danny Ford had that
success.
one. Yeah, the other sports beside football had success, but Danny Ford had one good team. Houston had 3 or 4, and then Bobby Petrino came along and had good success, but then that blew up, and Arkansas had just become an afterthought. And that's why the Saturday Down South guy that we talk about wrote the article before the season started, where he was basically saying, if the SEC continues to expand, they're going to kick Arkansas out because they're no good, which shows what a bozo he was. So don't read any garbage coming from that website. But what's happened now is everything has changed, and college football changes kind of slowly. You don't see major trends shift that fast. This is weird.
The NIL and
I've never seen the attitude toward Arkansas change so fast. I mean, all of a sudden they've gone from "who are you" to they're getting all this attention. ESPN's coming in here.
Yeah, you're right.
Outkick with Trey Travis comes in here, and now Clay Travis picks Arkansas #1 this week in his AP vote. And you're looking at all this stuff, and you're going, how is this happening so fast? So the best kept secret part is going away in a hurry. But I still think Arkansas is still a little bit of a secret, because until you come here, what do people think? I've got friends that I grew up with in Texas that still think I live like in a hillbilly place where there's just guys sitting on the front porch with their shoes off, picking banjos, and we don't have stores around here. And you got to go down to the Cracker Barrel country store and buy your groceries. And
Do they know how big the university is?
Yeah,
they just don't care.
I'm just telling you, they think you got to go to Little Rock to buy shoes and things like that. They're just crazy. They have no idea that we have restaurants up here that have the chef has been brought up from some fancy restaurant in New York because Walmart, somebody paid for it, and they have all these stores all up and down the interstate, stores you normally find in big cities. So it's not what they think it is. This area is still a well-kept secret. But what happens is when people get here, and this is what happened with the ESPN crew, with Clay Travis, because Clay Travis used to make fun of Arkansas not too long ago. Now he's just totally flipped.
Yeah.
All it took was him coming here and eating at Wright's Barbecue, and he just said, this is a great place. So it's all changing. And it's changing so fast, it's almost amazing. But the fan base has always been great.
Yeah, and the one thing is they're the only ones with a true Razorback. They're not 8 million Tiger colleges or
There's
whatever.
So many things about this program
Razorback
that are unique.
too.
Just one state, one Razorback. You know, it's pretty special.
All right, Semper a Hog says the most impressive catch Treylin Burks made on Saturday was the one where he was ruled out by a toenail, correctly, I think. What skills? What is the update on his injury status? How does he rate the other great Hog receivers in the past?
Well, Sam Pittman said on Monday he's fine, which tells me he will be at practice all week. I don't think there's an issue with him. I don't think he was hurt very badly in that game. Where does he rate? We were asked this a few weeks ago about, and Arkansas has some really good receivers in the past, statistically, numbers, fabulous numbers. And I don't think overall, certainly career-wise, because some of those guys stayed 4 years, he's going to end up with them in terms of stats. But there is one stat right now he's leading the nation, and that's yards per catch. He's averaging more yards per catch, and it's largely because of those two long touchdowns.
85 and 91, yeah.
Yeah, that's jacked him up. But he's got that rare combination of size and speed, and we saw it in that touchdown this past week where he's outrunning one of their cornerbacks all the way to the goal line, and he stumbled a little bit and still outran the guy. And he's got those big, huge hands that allows him to make those catches.
Showed his glove on TV one time.
It's like a huge catcher's, a first baseman's mitt that just huge. It's pretty incredible. So he's a rare in-state guy that has skills that's a once every 15 or 20 years guy with his skills. Now, boy, it would be nice if he'd come back for his senior year, but you better enjoy him while you've got him this year, because I don't think he's coming back.
He's coming back. First round projections.
Yep.
He's just been so good in these last 2 games. It felt like you're seeing his full potential.
And he got off to a slow start, and we were all scratching our heads, and what's going on with him? And now he's just
the injury. Got away from that injury.
Yep.
All right, Alabama Hog says Chad Morris won 4 games without an SEC victory. In less than 2 years, Coach Pittman has won 7 games, including 4 SEC victories, and Arkansas is currently ranked 8th. How is Coach Pittman and his staff able to gain the confidence and trust of Hog players so quickly? We've touched this a lot.
Yeah, we keep getting this question. The answer is still the same. He doesn't come across to these players like he's trying to sell something to them. That was the big complaint with Chad Morris. Like, he's trying to sell us on some idea or some concept. Hey, you got to do, and you can tell, I think players can tell when somebody's just feeding you a line. They can tell when you're real with what you're saying. And Sam Pittman, anybody that ever has been around him, knows him, will tell you that he's just real. What he says is what he believes. He's not pushing some point. He's not trying to sell you on something. He's just telling you, hey, this is what I think. Now, he's a player's coach, but you can get the wrong impression there. He's not soft. He's not some guy that'll go, oh, it's all right. If you screwed up, you're okay. He's not going to just ride somebody like old school coaches did back 20, 30, 40 years ago. But he's not also somebody that will just put up with you messing around. And Barry Odom told us that early on. He said, look, this guy's nice. He's fun to be around. But when he wants to make a point, he has no problem in a staff meeting telling some assistant coach, nope. That's not what we're doing. This is what we're doing.
And I think it was me and you at the SEC tournament, and you mentioned the people person part of it, where he was with that usher when he was moving him from one room to another, and in like a minute and 30, they were best friends.
Yeah, he put his arm around the guy. He's asking him where he's from, talking about stuff about he found something in common he had with that guy. It's like crazy.
Yeah, people just gravitate to that kind of energy. All right, Razorback Redneck says, we beat number 7 in the country. How much harder will it be to beat number 2?
A lot harder.
Yeah.
A lot harder.
They're one of the best teams.
Now, I don't want to in any way throw cold water on that win against the Aggies because it broke the streak. It was fun. But I said before this game was played, so it's not like I'm just making this up now. I said A&M was overrated. Early in the year, this happens. They would probably be a pretty good team right now if they had their original starting quarterback.
Yeah.
But this quarterback they've got is not an SEC quarterback. He's bad. I've seen him before. He gets rattled. He bounced that interception. He bounced the ball off one of the helmets of his own players. He hit an offensive lineman in the back of the head. You can't throw over that guy. He's 4 feet away from you, so he's got problems. Georgia's not like that at all. They're the real deal. Their defense is just tough.
Deadly, yeah.
Just tough. And they were decent offensively last year when they ended up, that game against Arkansas last year was, Arkansas I think had the lead at the half and then it just went away in the second half because Arkansas didn't have any depth on defense. So Arkansas will be better prepared this year. They've got more depth. They won't get worn out like that. But I think Georgia's better than they were a year ago. I've watched most of the better teams in games so far this year. I think they're the best team in the country. I think they're better than Alabama. I think they will play Alabama in the SEC championship game. I think they will beat Alabama. And I think Georgia will win the national champions. So they're going up against, in my opinion, the national champions.
No, I think you're right.
I don't expect them to win that game, but who knows? I mean, you go out and you play it, and it could happen, but maybe.
I remember watching Georgia week 1 against Clemson, and Clemson could do nothing. Now, granted, Clemson, everyone's saying they lost 2 games now this year, but they just whooped Vandy 62-0 like it was a practice. They said their practices are harder than their games. So Georgia looking like
they're awfully good.
Yeah, they're looking like a tough opponent. Austin Hog fan says Saturday's game opened at 18 in Vegas, I believe. And it's in Athens. With our special teams better and if no turnovers against us, we really need a couple of interceptions against them, Georgia, as their run game is okay, but not great in order to pull off the upset. What is your key to a win, Mike?
Well, definitely one key would be they would help you. They would throw a couple of picks or have some fumbles. I think that's definitely something you need. A mistake by them or maybe more than one that will help you. But mainly, it's not so much Arkansas's defense stopping their offense. It's how do you move the ball on them with your offense. Arkansas's offensive line, I thought, was a little bit subpar last week. They've been better than that. So they've got to be back where they were. They got to be pushing guys around. That's going to be hard to do because Georgia's D-line is really good. I think it boils down to Jefferson. I think he's got to do a better job of processing the RPOs. When he's making the right decision, when he's reading a defense and figuring out what to do, I think it works. When he doesn't, then I think Arkansas sputters. So he's going to have to make more correct decisions. The offense can't sputter. You can't waste possessions. You need to control. Even if you don't score, you don't need 3 and outs. You got to keep their offense off the field as much as possible. So if you get some help from them and your offense at least moves the ball and you keep them off balance a little bit, maybe you got a shot. But that's how you would possibly win that game.
Yeah, you have to be methodical because you're not going to get 85, 91-yard touchdowns on this Georgia team, and that's what they've been not relying on, but that's given them some boosts lately. All right, Jenna Pace on Facebook. I love that we're getting some questions on Facebook. Says, my husband really liked your favorite A&M game memory in last week's Ask Mike. He wants to know if you have any more Arkansas Aggie football game stories.
Well, I got a bunch of them, but I'll tell one that's a lot shorter than the one last week, a lot less involved.
That was still a good story.
So when this Southwest Classic first started, A&M was not in the SEC. And it was set up as a non-conference matchup with A&M against an old Southwest Conference foe. And Petrino was the coach, and Arkansas won those games. But we'd go down there, and Jason Carroll, who was our sports director, he would shoot, and then he would have me shoot. But he would take Arkansas, he would shoot video of Arkansas coming out on the field before the game. He'd make me go over there where the Aggies were, and I hated that. I was like, oh, don't send me over there where they are. So I'm over there, and I'm surrounded by these guys. They had some fans there that they let out on the field. They had a lot of people. And then they have these cadet corps guys, and everybody that knows the Aggies knows the cadet corps. So I'm standing next to one of these guys, and I just can't help myself, and I kind of, out of the corner of my mouth, without looking directly at him, I go, "Where's your horse?" And he had, you could tell he'd gotten that question before, because he goes, "That's not funny, sir." So I'm thinking to myself, it's funny to me, it's really an Aggie joke because of how they're dressed. And it got me thinking about their traditions and why they're so wacky. Now think about it. They have all these guys with these Teddy Roosevelt Rough Rider hats on from the charge on San Juan Hill. They've got these blackjack Pershing boots. He was a cavalry general during World War I. He had these black boots that he wore, and they've got that, and they've got the spurs, and they got these little weird poofy riding breeches they wear, the kind that billow out. It's strange looking. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, if you're all dressed up like that, you got to have a horse. So instead of having like 15 or 20 of these bozos, just have one.
One guy with one horse.
Just have one guy, and you give him a horse. And he gets on the horse, and he's riding around on the sidelines on the horse, and then all that stuff makes sense. It makes no sense to be dressed up like you're fixing to get on a horse when you don't have a horse. So the Aggies, just another example of the Aggies having weird traditions. They should change that and have one guy dressed up like that and put him on a horse.
And you'd still not go to the other sideline, though.
No, I still wouldn't want to get anywhere around them, but at least it would be a tradition that would make a little bit of sense.
And we'll see if the trophy continues on that tradition as well. All right, everyone, that wraps up our questions of Ask Mike this week. Arkansas versus Georgia. Going to have a lot more to talk about. Sam Pittman going up against Kirby Smart, former co-workers there. And we'll have a lot more to talk about next Monday. See you then.